What's up, everyone? I would say sports fans usually, and if you're a sports fan and you're watching this, that's cool because not everybody necessarily is going to be an American who watches this, but everyone everywhere is going to be subject to the politics that goes on where you stay. I just wanted to watch this because it's of interest to me. I wanted to just share my thoughts. I don't usually share my opinions in terms of my everyday life, usually because I have such strong opinions. It can turn into a debate that goes on for a while. I've learned a while ago to not let the emotions get the better of me. I transfer that over to my sports takes and opinions that I share. I feel, for the most part, whenever you do, when I say you, I mean anyone, whenever one does have a discussion where there is a hot debate on one or more different views that are usually opposing each other, for all that each individual believes in what they say, I can truly say that I have never, ever, ever seen anyone say, you know what, at the beginning of this conversation, I thought this, now I think that. I've never seen it happen. I'm not saying it hasn't, I just never seen it. About the only time you ever come close to that is if you're arguing over past history in terms of what happened. Did this team win? Did that team win? Did this issue get voted? Was it about this? Was this issue about that? Something that can be concretely decided by checking history to see what was recorded. And that's the only time I've ever seen anybody change their position. But in terms of a philosophy of this is how I think this should be done, this is how I think this team should go about, this is the player I think is better than that player, things like that, I've never seen anyone change their mind. So I'm thinking to myself, why am I going to be bothered to get worked up full of emotion when I can just state my case, try to be intellectual about it as possible. You want to at least I do. I want to speak from more than just I want this because I want this. This guy's better because I say this guy's better because it's I mean, if it has value to yourself, that's pretty much all it ever really needs to have. But if all it really never needs to have is just value to yourself, why do you even bother to share it with somebody else in the first place? I mean, are you trying to change that person's mind, or are you just trying to say what you think and you don't care if you change that person's mind? That's going to be probably different for each individual. But not getting off the track too far. Just this is the fourth and what turned out to be the final clip of the second overall session, so to speak, before they took their second recess or break. And I just wanted to break it down into smaller segments, as I mentioned on previous clips, in case you may have seen them. I'm sorry for sounding redundant, but I wanted to explain each clip individually in case this is the first one you happen to be watching. I wanted to break it down, makes it easier to digest in case you may have missed it or just wanted to watch it again for your own personal reasons. And share your comments and thoughts below about what you see, what you notice. I like to this is a good opportunity, I guess, for me to gain perspective and understanding I may not have had otherwise. It's always, I think, beneficial to try to look at things in more than one perspective. I think, in my opinion, it helps arrive at a more solid truth, so to speak. But yeah, feel free to share your thoughts and comments. Once more, always thank you to MSNBC for providing the video coverage, as I tried to find as neutral of a video or at least channel to record as I possibly could. And hit the like and subscribe buttons. Greatly appreciate it. And I'll go ahead and start the last clip of the second session now.
Yes, if I...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Earlier, you...
Yes, I yield my time. Come, please.
Earlier you said, I'm assuming New York's a one-party consent state. One person can record the other one without it being illegal.
Correct.
But you also were a member of the New York Bar?
I was, yes.
How would you rate recording clients in the ethical realm of being a lawyer?
It's not illegal, and
I'm not asking if it's illegal. I'm asking if it's ethical.
I don't know. That
Okay.
you have to leave
And
judgment of the Bar Association.
so, well, I think every other lawyer in here knows exactly where it is in the ethical standard. When you said you had 100 tapes, were any of those tapes of other clients?
Yes.
And I think this is pretty amazing. I really do. Did any of them waive privilege?
Nope.
So, 5 minutes ago, in the middle of our hearing on oversight, you just immediately responded that you would hand over tapes to this committee without any of your previous clients waiving privilege.
I'm not the only one in possession of those documents. Those documents are in the hands of all.
Whoever else is in charge of those documents is not my concern. My concern is I know lawyers that would go to jail before they would violate attorney-client privilege, and in a matter of a second, you just said, absolutely, I will turn those over.
Just trying to cooperate, sir.
At the expense of clients who have never waived privilege.
They're already in the hands, sir, of all of the agencies. I didn't ask people.
What law enforcement determines to do with something and what you determine to do with something, client privilege and attorney trust accounts are about the two most sacred things that you can ever do in your entire career as a lawyer. And
by the way, sir,
in a matter of a second,
And the tape with Mr. Trump,
Completely-
that it's out there is because Rudy Giuliani waived the privilege.
I'm not talking about Rudy Giuliani. I'm talking about you. And I don't know who's on those tapes. Only you know who's on those tapes. There's 100 of them.
The other one is also subject to an ongoing.
My point is, within a matter of a second, 1 second, you took absolutely no calculation of your role as those clients' counselor, the role that plays in privacy, and the role that plays in the solemn vow you took when you passed the bar, when you signed on to the bar, until recently were a member of the bar, and you just immediately said, if it helps me out in the today in front of TV, yes, absolutely, Mr. Chairman, you can have them. And I think, and that just goes into what we're going to talk about next briefly. We talk about these indictments on tax fraud and bank fraud as if they're isolated incidents, but they're not isolated incidents of bad judgment. These were intricate, elaborate lies that that needed to be held with constant constant deceptions of banks, businesses, associates, accountants, potentially your family. You received over $2.4 million in personal loans from Taxi Medallion Company 1. And those were loan payments for a business loan, correct?
No, sir.
You weren't receiving
Those.
Okay, go ahead.
Those were payments that were made by the management company that was operating the medallions
To you.
to me.
So, and those were deposited into your personal account, or in some instances your wife's account.
It was deposited into the joint checking account of my wife and I that's located at the base of the building that we reside in.
And were those disclosed on your tax returns?
They were not disclosed on my tax return.
And in fact, when your accountant talked to you about those deposits, you told him you wouldn't pay for a memo that you didn't ask to be done?
That's inaccurate.
So the
That's inaccurate.
sentencing court in New York has it wrong?
I don't know what Mr. Getzel wrote, my accountant. There are a series of issues regarding his memo anyway, including the fact he's almost directed me in an earlier memo to commit fraud. But putting all that aside with Jeff Getzel, the answer to that is I pled guilty, all right? And I made my mistake, and I'm going, as I've said 100 times now, I'm not so sure why the singular attack on my taxes, if you want to look at them, I'm more than happy to show them to you.
If the chairman will give me 20 minutes, I got plenty of other things to talk
Every
about.
single word that's
All right, I'm going to reclaim my
is
time.
not 100% accurate.
Well, I'm
And
done.
that's exactly why when it comes to the credibility, why I asked Mr. Davis, Mr. Monaco, to please, let's figure out how.
But that's my point with the credibility.
So that you understand.
These aren't isolated. These are not isolated incidents of attack. These were constant deceptions. Whether it's rolling over a $20 million line of credit to a $14 million credit, you went through great lengths to conceal that from one bank, while at the same time you are reducing your net income to another bank. These aren't things that happened on January 1 of 18, January 1 of 17, January 1 of 15. These are things that were constantly involved on My question is, was it exhausting keeping track of all the lies that you were telling all these people?
The gentleman's time has expired. You may.
I don't have an answer for him. I just
Very well,
thank you for
Mr. Senator.
continuing the narrative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Cohen, good luck on your road to redemption.
Thank you. It's
The
going to be a long way.
opposite of that is perdition, as I remember, and that's particularly hard on your children. So I wish you well, and I wish your family well. Mr. Cohen, as you sort of describe your road to here, Mr. Cooper asked you when the moment was, or moments when you decided you needed to change. It strikes me there is a transition that you have illuminated here. Your period of time, the 10 years working for somebody who you admired as a developer, and then when Charlottesville happened, and quite frankly, when the special counsel called you in, obviously was a key part of it, or you wouldn't be here. But the in-between part I find really interesting and troubling, at least in terms of appearances and confidence that the American people would have in this institution and democracy, quite frankly. So during that period of time, I want to ask you about two specific, if we have enough time. First, the Trump Tower. So you were negotiating for this. As you said, it was to be the tallest building in Europe. In your guilty plea with the special counsel, you quote, say, it quotes, Cohen asked individual one, is that President Trump?
Yes.
Okay. About the possibility of President Trump traveling to Russia in connection with the Moscow project, and asked a senior campaign official about potential business travel to Russia. When did this conversation happen? Do you recall?
Early on in the campaign.
And who was the campaign official?
Corey Lewandowski.
What did you discuss in this meeting?
Possibility of which dates that Mr. Trump would have availability if in fact that we were going to go over to Russia to take a look at the project. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, sir?
So go ahead.
Unfortunately, it never came to fruition because we were never successful in getting the first prong of what I needed, which was ownership or control over a piece of property. And until such time, there was no reason to come up with a date. But when I first received the information request to go to Russia, what I decided to do is I spoke to Mr. Trump about it. He told me to speak to Corey and see what dates might be available if I got the information I needed.
So it stopped because of appearances, or did it stop because the parties decided not to pursue it?
I'm so sorry, I don't understand your question.
So why did the pursuit of the Trump Tower that Mr. Trump has now said, of course he pursued it because he thought he might be going back into the development business. Why was the reason that the deal stopped?
Because he won the presidency.
Okay. So in that interim period of time, you must admit it looks troubling that now that we know what foreign influence was attempting to do, whether there was collusion or not, it certainly appears troubling that Mr. Trump was part of this negotiation, and at the same time what we know, perhaps separately, that the Russians were engaged in our election.
Well, I don't know about them being engaged in the election. I can only talk for myself. Here I would say to Mr. Trump, in response to his question, what's going on with Russia, is I'm still waiting for documents. And then that night at a rally, he would turn around and do his battle cry of no Russia, no collusion, no involvement, witch hunt.
Okay, on a separate subject but somewhat related, on January 17 of this year, the Wall Street Journal published a story stating that you hired John Gager, the owner of a consulting company who works for Liberty University in Virginia, to rig at least 2 online polls related to Donald Trump. Did you hire him?
Those were back in, I believe, 2015?
2014. 2014. So you did hire him.
Yes, I spoke with Mr. Gauger about manipulating these online polls.
And did he use bots to manipulate the poll?
He used algorithms, and if that includes bots, then the answer is yes.
Yes, that's accurate. Did the president have any involvement
Yes.
in directing you to do this?
Yes.
What were the results of the poll?
Exactly where we wanted them to be. In the CNBC poll, we came in at number 9, and the Drudge Report, he was top of the Drudge Report as well.
Okay.
Poll.
And
Please understand also, the CNBC poll was called the Contenders, and it was top 250 people that they named, and it was supposed to be the top 10 most influential people.
Let me just finish with, earlier today, you directed a comment to my colleagues, and I'm quoting, so correct me if I got this wrong. You said the more people who follow Mr. Trump, the more people will be where I am. Is it your expectation that people in the administration will end up where you are?
Sadly, if they follow blindly like I have, I think the answer is yes.
Thank you.
Time has expired, Mr. Sidney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I ran for Congress, I talked about how Washington was broken. But I certainly did not expect the level of political gamemanship, partisanship, and sheer stagnation of policies that would improve the lives of Americans that I'm witnessing today. It is terribly disappointing to me that this committee and its chairman chose to spend our time in questioning an individual that has zero probative value and zero credibility, instead of spending our limited time focusing on improving the lives of Americans, creating jobs, or streamlining the functioning of our federal government. Yet here we are, taking testimony from a convicted liar, and not someone who has just lied to his clients or family or friends, but testimony from an individual who deliberately and premeditatedly lied to this body. He lied to Congress through false statements and written statements. He lied to Congress through his testimony. He then amplified his false statements by releasing and repeating his lies to the public, including the other potential witnesses. Yet now, we on this committee and the American people are expected to believe Mr. Cohen's testimony. I don't know a juror in America that would believe anything Mr. Cohen says given his past actions and lies. Mr. Cohen, you stood before multiple congressional committees before today and raised your right hand and swore an oath to be honest. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And you lied to those congressional committees. Is that correct?
Previously?
Correct.
Yes, sir.
You stated that Trump never directed you to lie to Congress. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Therefore, you lied to Congress on your own accord and then admitted to lying to Congress. Correct?
I've already stated my piece on that. I knew what he wanted me to do. I was staying on party line.
But he never directed you to lie to Congress.
He did not use those words, no.
In your evidence that you provided this committee a mere 2 hours before the hearing started, were payments made to you by Mr. Trump, correct?
Amongst other things, yes.
Yet other than your testimony here today, there's absolutely no proof that those specific payments were for those specific purposes. Is that correct?
It's my testimony that the check that I produced as part of this testimony, the $35,000, and then the second check that's signed by Alan Weisselberg and Don Trump Jr., were two checks out of the 11 that were meant for the reimbursement of the hush money payment to Stormy Daniels.
So in your testimony on page 13, you claim, and I quote, Mr. Trump directed me to use my own personal funds from a home equity line of credit to avoid any money being tracked back to him that could negatively impact his campaign. Do you have any proof of this direction?
Just the payment, sir.
So no email?
Mr. Trump doesn't have email.
So no recording?
I do not have recordings, no.
No text message?
Mr. Trump doesn't text message.
So no direction other than your testimony today that that's what the payment was for?
And the fact that I paid on his behalf, at his direction, the money to Keith Davidson's IOLA account. You're right, there's no other documentation I have.
So nothing that you produced as part of your exhibits prove that President Trump directed you in any way to make that payment?
I don't even know how to answer that, sir.
Well, it's pretty simple. There's nothing in the evidence that shows, the exhibits that you provided today, that show that Trump directed you to make those payments.
Other than the non-disclosure agreement that has been seized by government authorities and it is widely shown, I don't believe there's anybody out there that believes that I just decided to pay $130,000 on his behalf.
Well, you were his attorney for over 10 years.
That doesn't mean that I pay $130,000.
Well, it doesn't also mean that he wasn't paying you for representation of counsel.
Okay.
So how did President Trump even know you had a HELOC?
I'm so sorry, sir.
How did President Trump even know you had a HELOC?
Because we discussed it. Because I told him the same thing, that I didn't want my wife to find out about it. And as one additional, Rudy Giuliani himself came out and expressed that Mr. Trump reimbursed me for the money that was spent to pay Stormy Daniels.
And did you tell Chris Como that you had no access to Mr. Trump during October and November of 2016?
I'm sorry, I don't know what you're referring to.
Your interview with Chris Como.
I would need to see the document.
Did you also tell Chris Como that you made these payments without telling Mr. Trump because you wanted to protect Mr. Trump?
And I was protecting Mr. Trump.
And you told him that you made these payments without telling him?
When I said that, if that's what I said to Chris Cuomo, yes, that was my line.
And if this unsupported claim was true, then it would be part of an ongoing investigation as evidence of a crime, and the Department of Justice would not let you discuss it during your testimony here today. Is that correct?
I don't know.
Gentleman's time has expired. Did you answer?
Yes, I did want to say one last thing. Not only did I lie to the American people, I lied to the First Lady. When the President called me, I was sitting in a car with a friend of mine, and he had me speak to her and explain to the First Lady. So the answer is you're not accurate, and I don't feel good about any of this, and this was not my intention.
Ms. Lawrence.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to put on the record as being a Black American and having endured the public comments of racism from the sitting president, as being a Black person, I can only imagine what's being said in private. And to prop up one member of our entire race of Black people and say that that nullifies that is totally insulting. And in this environment of expecting a president to be inclusive and to look at his administration speaks volume. So I have some questions. I want to talk to you about this intimidation of witness. Mr. Cohen, you were initially scheduled to testify before the House Oversight Committee on February the 7th, but your legal team delayed your testimony, quoting ongoing threats against your family from the president and Attorney Giuliani. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then on November 29th, after you admitted that the president's negotiations over a real estate project in Russia continue well through the summer before the 2016 election, President Trump called you, quote, a weak person and accused you of lying. And then on December 16th, 2018, after you disclosed that it was the president who directed you to arrange hush money payments to Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal to conceal his extramarital affairs, he called you, the President of the United States, a rat. Mr. Cohen, why do you feel or believe that the president is repeatedly attacking you? You are stating that you feel intimidated, asking us to protect you, following your cooperation with law enforcement.
When you have access to 60+ million people that follow you on social media, and you have the ability within which to spark some action by individuals that follow him, and from his own words that he can walk down Fifth Avenue, shoot someone, and get away with it. It's never comfortable when the President of the United States...
What do you think he can do to you?
A lot. And it's not just him. It's those people that follow him in his rhetoric.
What is a lot?
I don't know. I don't walk with my wife if we go to a restaurant or go somewhere. I don't walk with my children. I make them go before me because I have fear. And it's the same fear that I had before when he initially decided to drop that tweet in my cell phone. I received some, and I'm sure you'll understand, I received some tweets, I received some Facebook Messenger, all sorts of social media attacks upon me, whether it's the private direct message that I've had to turn over to the Secret Service because they are the most vile, disgusting statements that anyone can ever receive, and when it starts to affect your children, that's when it really affects you.
On January 20, 2019, Mr. Giuliani called your father-in-law, quote, a criminal, and said that he may have ties to organized crime. Mr. Cohen, do you believe that the president, Mr. Giuliani, publicly targeted your father-in-law as an effort to intimidate you? Can you elaborate? Why is your father-in-law being pulled into this?
I don't know the answer to that. My father-in-law was in the clothing business, came to this country because they paid in the 1972-73 the expulsion of Jews from the Ukraine. He came here to this country, he worked hard, and he's now enjoying his retirement. Never in my life did I think that Mr. Trump would do something so disgraceful. And he's attacking him because he knows I care about my family. And to hurt me, he's trying to hurt them. Interestingly enough, my father-in-law's biggest investments happen to be in a Trump property. So it just doesn't make any sense to me.
I want to be clear, any efforts to prevent a witness from testifying in front of Congress is against the law. I want to be real clear about that. And as the chairman has said, retaliating against witnesses and threatening their families and members is a textbook mob tactic that does not benefit the President of the United States or this country. And I want to be on the record, this hearing is not about discrediting the president. It's about the oath of office that we take as members of Congress to have checks and balances and to meet the laws and the policies of this country to serve. Thank you, and I yield back.
Roy.
Mr. Cohen, I too want to offer my heartfelt thoughts for your family and what they're going through. I know it's tough for your time here today. I know it's tough for you to stand here in front of this committee. The chairman suggested you volunteered to come here. You testified that you were asked to come here. Is it correct you were asked to come here, yes or no?
Yes.
The combined total of the crimes for which you were sentenced would bring a maximum of 70 years, yes or no?
Yes.
Yet you are going to prison for 3 years, yes or no?
Yes.
The prosecutors of the Southern District of New York say to secure loans, Cohen falsely understated the amount of debt he was carrying and omitted information from his personal financial statements to induce a bank to lend on incomplete information. You told my colleague here today that you did not commit bank fraud. Not parsing different statutes, which I understand could be on for clarity, are you or are you not guilty of making false statements to a financial institution, yes or no?
Yes, I pled guilty.
You said clearly to Mr. Cloud and Mr. Jordan that the Southern District of New York lawyers were being untruthful in characterizing your desire to work in the administration. Do you say again that the lawyers of the Southern District of New York are being untruthful in making that characterization, yes or no?
I'm saying that's not accurate.
Okay, so you're saying they're being untruthful.
I'm not using the word untruthful. That's yours. I'm saying that that's not accurate. I did not want a role or title in the administration.
I'm sure the lawyers...
I got the title that I wanted.
I'm sure the lawyers of the SDNY appreciate that distinction. Question, you testified today you have never been to Prague and have never been to the Czech Republic. Do you stand behind that statement?
Yes, I do.
I offer into the record an article in known conservative news magazine Mother Jones by David Korn, in which he says he reviewed his notes from a phone call with Mr. Cohen, that Mr. Cohen said, quote, I haven't been to Prague in 14 years. I was in Prague for one afternoon 14 years ago, end quote. Question, you, as my friend Mr. Armstrong rightly inquired, offered to the committee taped information involving clients with the bat of an eye. Do you stand behind that, yes or no?
I'm sorry, I don't understand. You said it so fast.
You, as my friend Mr. Armstrong rightly inquired, offered to this committee taped information involving your clients with the bat of an eye. Do you stand behind that offer?
If the chairman asks me, and I'll take it under advisement now, and it's not a problem in terms of attorney-client privilege, yes, I will turn it over.
You, as my friend Mr. Meadows pointed out, misled this committee even today in a written submission that contradicted your testimony. You have suggested you are going to review that. Did you review it? Are you going to review it in our next break to correct the record, yes or no?
Yes.
Question, you helped out the president's campaign or were involved in the campaign as a representative, as a spokesman, even in your words today. It was your idea for the campaign dating back to 2011. Is that accurate, yes or no?
Yes.
2011 is a year that sticks in my head. For it's the year my daughter was born, and it was the year I was diagnosed with cancer. I was not then pushing for Donald Trump to be president. I was fighting cancer. Even in 2016, I was publicly backing a certain Republican from Texas. Some might guess who it was. But you were all in. And you either wanted Donald Trump to be your president because it would be good for the country, or you did it for your own personal advancement, or both. Sort of the two options. Real Americans in my district and across the country wanted the president to be president, not in any way because he's perfect, but rather because they are sick and tired of this hellhole. They supported the president because they are sick and tired of the games that we are seeing here today. They are sick and tired of politicians who refuse to secure the border, balance our budget, restore healthcare freedom, and then get the hell out of their way so they can lead their life. They are mystified that we amass about $100 million in debt per hour, which means we've blown through $300, $400, $450 million during this charade in amassing debt. $450 million. They're sick and tired of a Democrat Party that willfully ignores cartel-driven asylum crisis on our border that endangers American citizens and the migrants who seek to come here. Just yesterday in Eagle Pass, Texas, Border Patrol agents arrested an MS-13 gang member. In McAllen, Texas, federal authorities are offering a reward for a man tied to Mexico's Gulf cartel for his alleged roles in various murders, kidnappings, and home invasions in South Texas. A mass Honduran migrant rush at the Texas border forced brief closure of the Laredo port. This is this week. This is what we're ignoring. This is not what we're doing for the American people while we engage in this charade. This is not what the American people sent us here to do. This is an embarrassment for our country. I talked to my beautiful wife back in Dripping Springs, Texas, just before the hearing. I said, don't bother watching. She said, as I roughly expected, don't worry, I won't. I have more important things to do. And she, like the rest of the American people, have a hell of a lot more important things to do than to watch this. I said, amen, darling. I can't help but think that is what the majority of the American people are thinking while watching this unbelievable circus. I yield back.
Ms. Prescott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a lot to do as well. I've got houses and schools to help rebuild in the Virgin Islands, expansion of voting rights, educational opportunities, criminal justice reform. Thank God the Democratic majority can walk and chew gum at the same time. So we're here with you right now. Mr. Cohen, you learned well in the 10 years that you worked with Donald Trump. What was your position with the GOP in the up to 8 months ago?
I was the vice chair of the RNC Finance Committee.
You were vice chair of the finance of the Republican National Committee, right?
Correct.
Okay.
I do want to say I was a Democrat until Steve Wynn found out I was a Democrat and made me switch parties.
That would be
Said
a
it
smart
wasn't
thing
right
to
for
do.
a Democrat to be the vice chair.
Good. Let's get to it. I only have a little bit of time. On behalf of the many members here who have expressed to your family our apologies to your family, but I want to apologize for the inappropriate comments and tweets that have been made by other members of this body. And as a former prosecutor and as former counsel on House ethics, I think that at the very least there should be a referral to the Ethics Committee of witness intimidation or tampering under USC 1512 of my colleague Matt Gaetz, and it may be possibly him being referred for a criminal prosecution. So I want to put that on the record. On May 2nd, 2018, the president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, who was his personal attorney like you, appeared on Fox News and referred to the president's reimbursement to you for the $130 payment for Stephanie Clifford as part of a retainer. And on May 3rd, 2018, one day after Mr. Giuliani's appearance, the president tweeted, and I quote, "Mr. Cohen, an attorney, received a monthly retainer not from the campaign and having nothing to do with the campaign, from which he entered into through reimbursement a private contract between two parties known as a non-disclosure agreement, or NDA. The Office of Government Ethics, which is the agency which the federal government with responsibility over what the president needs to report publicly about his assets, was puzzled by this, it seems, and they were skeptical that a retainer was actually in place and asked to see the retainer agreement on call of May 8th with the president. The president's personal counsel, Sherry Dillon, replied that she would, and I quote, "not permit OGE staff to read the agreement because it is privileged." Ms. Dillon would not even let OGE staff come to her office to review the retainer agreement. Mr. Cohen, in a court filing made in August of last year, federal prosecutors stated that, quote, "in truth and in fact, there was no such retainer agreement." Mr. Cohen, did you ever have a retainer agreement in place with the president for the payment to Ms. Clifford?
No.
So was Mr. Giuliani's statement inaccurate?
Yes.
Was Ms. Dillon's statement about the retainer agreement inaccurate?
I'm sorry, Ms. Dillon's statement is?
About the retainer agreement, is it inaccurate?
And her statement is what?
And her statement to them was, quote, not to permit OGE staff to read the agreement because it is privileged.
There was no agreement.
And is the president's tweet or his statement accurate?
And I'm sorry, one more time.
And his statement was, Mr. Cohen, an attorney, received a monthly retainer, not from the campaign and having nothing to do with the campaign, from which he entered in through a reimbursement.
That's not accurate.
You've mentioned some individuals to my colleague from New York, Ms. Connolly, and also in your testimony about Mr. Weisenberg and other individuals, Ms. Rona. Who are those individuals? Are they with the Trump organization?
They
And
are.
are there other people that we should be meeting with?
So, Alan Weisselberg is the chief financial officer.
You got to quickly give us as many names as you can so we can get to them.
Yes, ma'am.
As Ms. Rona, what is Ms. Rona's position?
Rona Graff is Mr. Trump's executive assistant.
And would she be able to corroborate many of the statements that you've made here?
Yes, her office is directly next to his, and she's involved in a lot that went on.
Okay, Mr. Cohen, when the president's lawyers were having the discussions with the Office of Government Ethics in 2018, did they reach out to you to talk with you about these payments?
No, ma'am.
And what did you share anything with them otherwise in any other conversation?
I do not recall, no.
Can the committee obtain more information about these facts by obtaining testimony and documents from the White House, the Trump Organization, and the president's attorneys?
I believe so.
Mr. Chair, I think that those are the individuals that we should be speaking with, and I yield back at this time.
The committee will now stand in recess again. We will come back. Listen up, 35 minutes after the last vote begins. So, for Mr. Cohen, we're talking about probably about an hour or so. All right.
So much.